Rectangles and ellipses are special forms of polygons. Rectangles are fairly straightforward, whereas ellipses can be a bit tricky, but they do have some similarities. Rectangles work a lot like the polygon command, except that you're stuck with the criteria of a rectangle. You have two parallel sets of sides that are equal. And we've drawn the rectangle command several times already. So if I pick rectangle, pick my starting point, pick my finish point, there's a rectangle. So you pick 2 points on opposite sides of the rectangle to create your shape. So you can just pick the command here out of the ribbon, or you can type in rectangle or just REC, press return. So you pick your first point, and then you pick your second point. Now you can also define the lengths of the line to make it exact. You just type it in similarly to drawing a line. So let's say I want it to be 24 inches. I tab over, and then we'll make it 12 inches high. And there we go. So we have drawn this rectangle at 2 feet wide and 1 foot tall. And you can see when I select it, my grips tell me that this is also just a regular polyline. Now there are some other options for the rectangle. If you notice here, you have chamfer, elevation, fillet, thickness, and width. Now to define the chamfer or fillet, you'll choose either the option C for chamfer or the option F for fillet, then you type in the value. So let's use a chamfer unit of 5. So we're going to type in C, press return, type in 5, and then 5 again because it gives it a bit of an angle. So now I pick my first point, and it looks just like a regular rectangle until the box is big enough to have a 5-unit chamfer on the corners. So that's a really cool trick. So if I do this again, and I select C for chamfer, let's say I go 10 units and then 5 units on that chamfer. Pick my first point, and you can see I have a chamfer here, but it's a little bit different because one is at 10 units and one is at 5. It goes down 10 and then 5. So keep in mind that first number you're going to pick, it'll go across and then up, and here it goes down and then across, etc. Keep that in mind. You're going to get weird shapes, and you typically aren't going to need something like this. And it's not going to give you something that is mirrored or symmetric unless both units are the same. So you're going to get kind of weird stuff, but if that's what you need, then it works out perfectly. Now the fillet option for the rectangle command works almost identically. So you start the rectangle command, type in F for fillet, press return, and then you enter in a value. I'm going to enter in 5 again, press return. So instead of the corners or the notch corners, corners are going to be round. And it has a radius of 5 units. So that's the fillet. It's very simple, and it makes a nice little shape. Rectangles are simple polygons, but you can get pretty fancy when drawing with them. So you start the command again and look at the options, and you see that there is an elevation work. Well, that's for 3D work or for a thickness. So if I type in E for elevation, and I type in a value of 5, and then I draw my rectangle, I zoom in here, it looks exactly the same. Well, it's not. It's at a different elevation. It's up higher. It's kind of hard to see, but if I rotate my view, you see all of these rectangles are drawn at an elevation of 0. This one is at an elevation of 5. So that's just something else that you can do with it automatically. Now, my thickness option, I'm going to call it 5. And I'm going to draw a rectangle again. Again, in 2D, it looks the same. But when I rotate, it's 5 units tall or thick. It's also starting still because I made that one change at an elevation of 5. So you have to keep that in mind. Every little change I've made to the setting, I made a fillet for the corners. I changed the elevation to 5. And I change the thickness to 5. It keeps adding to that. It remembers that. It keeps it the way that you had set it before. So keep that in mind. It doesn't reset every time you start the rectangle command. And on my last option, the width, type in W. Again, I'm going to use 5 because that number has been working so well for us. And I'm going to draw my rectangle. So now you can see here I have a very thick or very fat looking rectangle with my rounded corners. And then when I rotate, you can see here it's 5 units tall, 5 units wide, and at an elevation of 5 units. So in order to reset all of that, I'm going to have to go through my rectangle command, go through all of my settings, go to my fillet, set that to 0, go to my elevation, set that to 0, go to my thickness, set that to 0, and go to my width and set that to 0. And now I have a regular, plain old, boring rectangle again. So there are a lot of things that you can do with a rectangle besides just a regular old rectangle. Now let's take a look at the ellipse command. Now, ellipse is essentially an oval, and there are basically two ways to draw them. The command starts and you pick the center point, then you're going to pick two other points. Now there are two other ways to draw it as well, but we're going to start with just the regular ellipse command. You can type in the word ellipse, just type in the letters EL for ellipse, or you can go up to the ribbon and start the command. First of all, it asks you for a center point, and then for a width point. Think of this as being a horizontal line. That shows you how wide it's going to be. And now you have to define the height. As you can see, as I stretch it, it goes from a circular looking object to a more oblong traditional oval. And that's it. It's very simple to draw. Now, if I turn on my ortho command, press the F8 key, or if I click down here, I can draw a very simple, perfect looking oval. And that's great. You can use this a lot of times if you're making piping drawings in a profile view with an exaggerated Y-axis. In civil design, you do this often, and so I get to do this quite a bit. So I'm drawing pipes cross sections like this all the time. So that's one practical use of an ellipse. Let's look at the axis and endpoints. So I specify my axis endpoints. That's my width. It skips the circle part. So I'm essentially picking on one side and then I'm picking on the other side. That's how wide my ellipse is going to be. And then I go to the height. Very simple. And then my other option here is the elliptical arc. Essentially, I'm drawing an ellipse, but I'm only going to draw an arc. So I pick my center point, my width point. I'm defining how the ellipse is going to look. I'm going to turn off my ortho command for this part. Now I pick my start point, and now I'm drawing the arc length. So that's how you get an ellipse like that. Now the ellipse, keep in mind, if your ortho command is turned off, like I have mine off right now, when I pick my points, I pick my center point, and then I pick my width, it's going to be drawn at this angle. It's not perfectly horizontal or vertical. So it can be oblonged like that. So there are a lot of different ways to draw it. And it depends, again, on exactly what you're trying to draw, the perspective of it, or what information that you have at the time.